Hi everyone, my name is Timehin and I'm a professional photographer based in London, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about my journey and what I do, but also how I have overcome or adapted during these very difficult times for freelancers and creatives. And so hopefully by the end of this webinar you'll be able to use some of these tips and tricks and implement them into your own business and daily lives. Enjoy. I've been taking photos for around 11 years now. I initially started by using an iPhone, and I learnt the fundamentals of photography, things such as composition, lighting, focus, and I quickly found that photography was a very deep passion of mine. And so I invested in a DSLR and then moved on to mirrorless systems. And it was around about 5 years ago I decided that I wanted to make this my full-time profession. I wanted to make money from taking photos of cityscapes, landscapes, portraiture, and just general commercial photography. And so I'm very proud now that I've been able to work with some of my favourite brands. Those include Sony, Wex, GQ, Prada and Adobe. And yeah, I've been very fortunate that I've worked with Vogue now, and that happened this year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I achieved that shoot, or how I got that shoot, and also a little bit about what it was like. One of the biggest factors that attributed to me being hired for Vogue was networking. I know that is something that people shy away from, or they don't like the notion of it's who you know. However, it does play a massive part within the creative industry, and so I advise anybody who is looking to build a business in photography, network as much as possible. That means going to meetups, going to workshops, sharing your work online, connecting with people on social media. Anything you can do that can get your work in front of more people is going to help you in the long run. Although networking does play a massive factor within the creative industry, your work needs to be up to standard, and you need to demonstrate that you can shoot the work that you want to be hired for. And so even though the in came through somebody I knew, I still had to be approved by the client. And so that's why having your best work displayed in a website that's nice and concise and professional goes a long way. And I've been fortunate that I'd worked with a number of different publications before, such as GQ and Hypebeast, Tyson Abiety. So I've demonstrated in the past that I'm capable of taking photos of people, specifically for editorial purposes. And so the combination of those two aspects enabled me to work with Vogue. Around 2 to 3 years ago, I was networking and I met a gentleman named Misan Harriman. Misan is an incredible photographer. He's also an entrepreneur that founded the page What We See. And little did we know back then that our paths would cross so much. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we've worked on some personal projects together. We're working on a documentary together at the moment, which I'll speak a little bit about later. But what really connected us and what effectively got us the Vogue shoot was our photography at the Black Lives Matter protest that had happened in London. The Black Lives Matter protests, not just in London but globally, were an important historic moment, not only because of what had happened, but also because it was happening during a global pandemic. And a time where a country is supposed to be in lockdown, the fact that so many people were going to show their support and solidarity was something that, as a photographer, myself and Misan, we needed to document. The images that Misan and I had captured at the protest were featured in numerous different places around the world. Misan's images were actually featured on CNN, BBC, ITV News, GQ, and mine were featured on numerous publications as well. And so that brought us a lot of attention from people that might not have seen our work before. One of these organisations or companies were Vogue. The editor-in-chief, Edward Enninful, had seen Misan's photos in particular and had decided that the September front cover needed to change. It wasn't going to be acceptable to put out something along their usual lines. They wanted to do something that would show their support for the Black Lives Matter movement, but also show the support for black people in general. And to do that, they had decided that they wanted to hire a crew that was majority people of colour, which was an incredible experience for me because growing up and shooting a lot of commercial work, I'm normally one of the only people of colour on that set. So to be surrounded by so many people that look like me, who are also incredibly good at what they do, was just an amazing and proud feeling for me. For the front cover, he had decided that Marcus Rashford, for the work he'd been doing in relation to school meals and bringing back free school meals for kids in the UK, and Adoa Aboa, who's also an amazing women's activist, especially when it comes to mental health. And so those two would make the perfect couple to go on the front cover for the September issue. Now all that was left was to find the crew, and Missan was picked because of not only the work he'd been shooting at the Black Lives Matter protest, but also his previous work shooting celebrities and incredible people around the world. Of course, Missan needed a little bit of help, and so I was on his list of people to come and support him. Myself and an amazing filmmaker called Cornelius Walker were invited to come to the Vogue front cover shoot, which happened at Marcus Rashford's house. Now, although I was primarily there to help support Missan and to shoot some BTS content as well as some supporting imagery, one of the images I took of Marcus Rashford was adored by not only his team but by Vogue themselves, and so they decided to include that in the issue and also to use it as one of their lead images for majority of press and their articles online as well. So one of my images was featured globally by Vogue. It was featured by the editor-in-chief himself, and it was featured on the majority of news sources in the UK. So yeah, it was an incredible achievement for me. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how my work has developed and adapted over the past year or so, and how I've shifted my attention in photography from creating content primarily for social media to creating content that would hopefully stand the test of time. Over the last year or so, I found that my intention with photography has shifted from creating one-off bangers, as people call it, or one-off striking images, to creating bodies of work. And I find that with bodies of work, there is an ability in there to tell stories more effectively. And so over the last year, I've been working on projects that are taking a little bit longer, but feature more images and tell a story more in depth. One of my favourite projects that I photographed this year was my expedition in Morocco. I travelled from Marrakesh through the Atlas Mountains to Mazuga and into the Sahara Desert. Not only did I photograph incredible vast landscapes of sand and mountains and incredible Milky Way skies, but I also photographed some of the intricacies and the details of Moroccan life. And to this date, this has been one of my most precious photography essays that I've done. Whereas before I might have only shot the beautiful landscapes and only sought out to shoot those images, having the mindset of wanting to tell a deeper story, a story that featured more people, had images of people in their daily lives, people that you would often miss, it gave you a greater sense of what Moroccan life is like. And I think that was more powerful than just the incredible landscapes. One way I achieve images like these are I'm always open-minded. I'm never scared to put myself out there. If there's an opportunity for me to integrate within the culture further, then I leap at it. I think the way I love to travel is to be really integrated into the society that I'm visiting and experience as much of that authentic culture as possible. So that's something that has changed over the last year or so. Before I would research and find the classic spots or the most popular locations of an area that I'm traveling to, but now I like to connect with the locals a bit more and let them lead me along the way. I think having this shift in mindset and mentality when it comes to my photography has helped my commercial photography as well. It's enabled brands to relate to me a little bit more and can see that I'm able to tell a story or demonstrate a narrative within a series of images, and it's very important if you want to shoot more documentary style work or editorial work as well. One of the most difficult things for me during this pandemic has been not being able to go out and shoot due to lockdown restrictions, not being able to travel, again for the same reasons, but also the lack of work. So of course when lockdowns were initially mentioned or initially put into place, work fell like flies, as I'm sure it did with a lot of you as well. And so I needed to find a way to adapt and overcome. Not only adapt and overcome, but also utilize my time in an effective way so that when things did start to open up again a little bit, I was ready for potentially an influx of work. One of the very first things I started doing during lockdown was assessing all of my client-facing material and making sure that it was up to date and it still looked very professional. So when I say client-facing material, I mean things like your website, making sure that your most recent work is on there, your best work is on there. If you need to re-edit anything, then making sure that you're getting those re-edited versions up on your site. And of course your website is one of the biggest things that attracts high-paying clients to your work. And so that is very important that you have it up to date. I'd also created a 2-page PDF in the past, which contains my social media statistics. It also has information about my commercial photography, a few examples on there, and maybe some pricing as well. I highly recommend you creating one of these. It makes it very easy and efficient to send out your information to potential clients. One thing I did when I was starting out with freelance photography was I found the emails of the top 100 photography agencies in the UK, and I sent them that 2-page PDF along with a short bio of who I was and why I wanted to work with them. I got around maybe 20 to 30 replies back, but that was 20 to 30 new clients that I didn't have before. Although I knew that photo shoots weren't happening, I was making sure to continually check in with my clients and make sure that they knew I was still alive and that these were my terms for working, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't be traveling, or this is what I would need to make sure that I'm safe, or the models are safe, or the client's safe, etc., etc. So just maintaining that dialogue and that communication was important as well. Keeping up your social media presence during lockdown is incredibly hard, especially for somebody like me who posts cityscapes and travel. I found that the best practice for me was to reinvent some of my older imagery. So looking at older photos and using sky replacement tools or using new editing techniques that I learned since then to make them look even better. I found that that was a good way to keep my creative mind going, but then also keep creating semi-fresh content for social media. One of the biggest things that kept me going through lockdown in terms of financial support has been teaching. As a lot of you know, I do a lot of workshops anyway, but I found that during lockdown this was an opportunity for me to do even more. And so doing live streams, working with brands and showing that you are still able to share valuable insight and knowledge without having to be there in person is a great way to keep some money coming in. Something else to do during a lockdown is to teach yourself new skills. I personally started learning After Effects and playing around a bit more with Premiere and looking a bit more at video. And so whilst I can't go out personally and take photos of the things I'm usually taking photos of or stuff that I love, I'm not letting that time go to waste, and I'm learning new skills. Even to building new websites, working on new projects, coming up with creative ideas so that when lockdown eventually ended, I was able to go out and shoot them. So just make sure that every day you're just working at something or keeping your mind going. Another personal project I started during lockdown was a documentary. Although I've featured in documentaries in the past and I've worked alongside people in documentaries, I'd never actually produced one myself. And with everything that had been going on with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protest, I found that it was a calling for me to try and put my hand at creating a documentary finally. The documentary itself is about the black experience being in the UK. So we've interviewed around 18 incredible people who range from doctors to actors to activists and philanthropists. So yeah, we've given them a platform so that they can speak their mind and give their testimony of what it's been like as a person of colour growing up in the UK. And yeah, it's going to be very special, so keep an eye out for it when I share some more news. As a photographer, I'm often asked what kit I take with me and what I use that certain kit for. So I thought I'd give you guys a rundown of my setup and what scenarios I use which lens for and which body for. So to start, we have the A7R Mark IV. I absolutely love this body. It's 61 megapixels, so it covers me for anything commercial speaking. So I'll normally take this out to my commercial shoots because I know that if the client do request for the images to be printed large, then this body has the capabilities to do so. I absolutely love the way that it feels in my hand. The ergonomics of this are lovely. It's definitely a step up from the previous models. As you can see, I've also got the battery grip extender at the bottom, and this just keeps my mind at ease when it comes to battery life. You've got 2 batteries that sit in there, so I don't have to worry about that. And then also, if I'm shooting portraits or shooting in portrait mode, it's got the button at the top here, so it means that I'm able just to shoot using this button instead of having to wrap my arm around the front of the camera and shoot like this. So yeah, body of choice for commercial work and for cityscape or landscape work, the A7R Mark IV. The second body that I primarily shoot with is the A9. I absolutely love this body, and it's incredible for shooting high speed or high action images. I normally use this for general portraiture or for any sports I shoot. It's 24 megapixels, so it means that it's not as big as the A7R Mark IV, but I find that with this resolution it's more than capable for the majority of shoots that I do. So yeah, I absolutely love this. There is an A9 Mark II out as well, which is also very incredible, but yeah, I love the A9. It serves me very well. Another camera that I tend to use is the A7R Mark III. I will use that if I don't want to use the A7R Mark IV. The file sizes on this camera can be quite large, so if I want to shoot something but I still want to have that high resolution, then the A7R Mark III fits that category well. Right, lenses. When it comes to lenses, my go-to lens is the 35mm, the Zeiss f1.4. I absolutely love this lens. It's a very versatile lens, and I feel that if I was going to go out shooting and I could only take one lens with me, then it would be the 35mm 1.4. Incredible lens. It's great for portraits, great for cityscapes, landscapes. Yeah, a very good all-rounder. Another lens that I really love to use is the 50mm f1.4 by Zeiss again. And this lens is beautiful. The glass on this is incredible, incredibly sharp images, and I will normally use this lens for portraiture. Yeah, one of my go-to lenses for portraiture. I've also shot cityscapes and landscapes using it as well, but I would normally use this for stacking. So if I'm shooting photos of the Milky Way like you saw in the Sahara Desert, that was actually shot on the 50mm, and I would take multiple images of the sections of the sky and then photo merge them in Photoshop. So yeah, an incredibly powerful lens. Another lens that I love to use is the 70-200 f2.8. This lens is a beast, and I find that when you shoot on a telephoto lens such as this, it changes your whole perspective of imagery, I guess. It gives a lovely compression between the background and the foreground, and it can make things look very close to each other even though they're quite far apart. So I will use this for landscapes, again cityscapes, and even portraits. Yeah, fantastic lens. If I want to shoot something that is a little bit further away, then I actually have the 2x teleconverter. And what this does is it effectively takes the 70 to 200 and doubles it. So it becomes 140 to 400 lens, which is incredible. I've been able to take photos of the moon, and generally just shoot stuff that's further away that I wouldn't be able to reach without it. So definitely one to have in your tool bag, especially if you don't want to invest in a long lens such as a 400mm or anything bigger, then this is a good compromise to have. A lens that I love to use as well is the 12 to 24 f4. This lens is a great wide angle lens. I normally use this for shooting interior architecture shots or general lookup shots. I love this lens, and you never feel restricted or constrained by it, so it's definitely a fun one to play around with. I would say that just be careful with the distortion you might get. Try not to tilt it too much, otherwise you could make objects seem a little bit skewed. But in general, yeah, a very, very good lens. One of my favourite lenses to shoot with in general is the 16 to 35 f2.8. This lens is, again, such a diverse lens. It's also very sharp and very fast. Having it at f2.8 means that you're able to shoot low light situations with a wide angle lens, which is fantastic. It's amazing for shooting night skies or just general street photography at low light situations. So yeah, this is the one for wide angles for me. Yeah, the Sony G Master 1635 f2.8. And last but not least, we have the 85 f1.8, and this lens is beautiful for street photography or for portraiture. I'll normally use this on my photo shoots when I'm shooting clients or people. I find that the compression and just the way it makes the model's face look is very natural and very beautiful. So this is my go-to lens for taking photos of people. Saying that, I have used it to shoot landscapes and cityscapes as well, depending on how far away you are from the subject. So don't shy away from using it for different uses. But yeah, this is another amazing lens. Something that I take with me occasionally is my DJI Mavic Air, and this is a drone. I'll normally use this for, of course, taking aerial photography shots, well, permitting on whether I'm allowed to or not in the location. But yeah, this is an amazing piece of kit. I just love how small it is. I'm able to just pop it in my camera bag alongside my Sony gear and lenses. So yeah, if you're looking for something that you can get some great aerial photography shots, but you don't want to pay as much as the Mavic Pro 2, or you don't want it to be as big, then I highly recommend the Mavic Air. So there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning into today's webinar. A massive shout out to Sony and to Wex for allowing me the space to talk to you guys today. And yeah, if you have any further questions, then make sure to send me a DM on Instagram. You can find me at Timehin, and I'll be sure to help out. Take care.